Hello, I'm Errol Lawson, and welcome to the Rising Generation Leadership Podcast, where I chat to influential Christian leaders twice a week, with the simple goal of helping established and up-and-coming leaders to fulfill their leadership potential. Each episode is packed with leadership insights and tactics from our established interview guests that you can apply right now in your life today. For more information or to subscribe to the podcast, go to www.errollawson.com/podcast, where you can catch up on previous shows, read the show notes from our guests, find out their contact details, their book recommendations, and much, much more. Thank you for joining us today. Enjoy the episode. Thank you for joining us today on the podcast. I've got with me an awesome man of God today. It's Reverend John Andrews. If you don't know, John has been in full-time church leadership since 1987. Though called to the UK, John has ministered in over 30 nations around the world with a passion to equip and inspire leaders as well as empower followers of Jesus to effective lifestyle and service. After leaving Bible school, he helped pioneer and repurpose a church in the village of Havercroft, West Yorkshire, serving there from 1987 to 1997. From Havercroft, he moved to Rotherham New Life in South Yorkshire, now called the Hub Christian Community, where he helped repurpose that church into a vibrant missional community, serving from 1997 to 2012. In 2012, John joined the team of Renewal Christian Centre in Solihull, where he served as a senior associate leader until the end of 2014. John is now the principal of the British Assemblies of God Bible College, where he serves to help raise up a new generation of Christian leaders and influencers. Graduate of Master's Hall himself, he also holds a master's degree in Pentecostal and Charismatic Studies from the Sheffield University and a doctorate from the University of Wales. He's authored 11 books, a whole list of them I won't go into right now, but he's born in Belfast in Northern Ireland. He's married to Dawn, and together they have 3 children, Elena, Simeon, and Beth Ann, not forgetting Pepperoni and Salami, their sausage dogs. His hobbies are supporting his beloved football team, Liverpool. Yes, get in there. And listening to music, reading and watching great movies. He loves to eat, and among his favourite food groups are Chinese, Thai, and chocolate.
Yeah.
John, thanks for joining us today, man.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Yeah, thank you.
Listen, that's a pretty illustrious biography there. But if you wouldn't mind just taking a moment to fill in any gaps in your bio there and give us an insight into what you're up to today in the world, what you're up to right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was raised in Belfast, as the bio says, but very, very privileged to have been raised in a Christian home. So I had 2 fantastic parents who really tried to point me in the right direction at multiple levels, which was wonderful. So I grew up in a very supporting home, became a follower of Jesus when I was 8, and really in my mid-teens got a sense of call to leadership and church ministry, and really just pursued that call through Bible college. So in many ways, the driver of the last 27, 28 years has been a passionate call to follow God, to love God, and to serve God's purpose on the earth through the church. So that would be the diamond head of everything I'm about. So whatever else I've done or whatever else I do, it's all about really that is the main thing in my life. That's the one main thing.
At what age did you get into ministry?
I left Bible college at 20.
Okay.
So pioneered our first church at 20 years of age. I actually had my 21st birthday in my pioneer church, which was a bit weird. And then, of course, married my wife the following summer. So Dawn and I actually got married in the first church we pioneered. So we were pretty young, pretty inexperienced, but full of passion. I worked under a sort of the senior leader. He was in a mother church, if you like, and I worked under him. And I described that context as having sort of enough rope to fly with, but not enough to hang myself with, which was a good combo, I think, in terms of letting me really get into stuff and experience it and stretch my wings, if you like, without being sort of completely scorched by stupid mistakes. So it was a great learning experience, very tough, very intense, but absolutely, well, I loved every minute of it because it was what I wanted to do.
Awesome. So I was going to ask you, did it work? You know, you said you loved every minute of it. So obviously it worked. What made it so successful and an experience for you at that age, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, to say I loved every minute of it. Obviously, there were some dark and difficult and trying moments, but by and large, it was an amazing experience because I think fundamentally it was something I wanted to do.
Yeah.
It was something I believe I could do. So I believed that a number of things were colliding, that a sense of real call to my life to do this. And also, even though I was young and still learning, there was a sense in which I really believed I had the basic giftedness in place to at least do some of this stuff, even though you're always learning and growing. So I think those factors became bedrock factors in my growth and development, really believing that I had a sense of call to this, but also that I had some giftedness in me to help make this stuff happen. And very, very quickly built team, built people around me, got people involved to do things that I couldn't do, and sort of work together as a community to just try and build something there. So they were really enjoyable and exciting experiences in building that from the ground up.
How did you know you're called to this and not to something else, were there any other things that you thought about going into at the time? Was there another path you maybe considered pursuing?
Well, believe it or not, I fancied being a soldier, which sounds like a surreal thing now, but maybe growing up in the Troubles in Belfast, I saw the soldiers at work, saw paratroopers, wanted to be a paratrooper, wanted to travel the world. I think there was a desire to sort of just go and do something and be something. But I think what changed it dramatically for me was a very profound sense of change of direction because of God at work in my life. And that really did change the direction of my life. I think the side of me was stirring as a teenager. Everything I was involved in, I tended to end up leading it or being involved in influencing it. So that was growing and that was developing. But really, as a sort of a 15-year-old, 16-year-old, God took a hold of me. And very, very clearly, I felt a sense of call to serve God. Wow. Even though at 16, I wouldn't have known. If you'd have said to me at 16, what's your life going to look like? I wouldn't have known. I just knew that the next step was following whatever God wanted, which for me was moving in a direction towards Bible college. And that became a very formative experience.
Was there like a significant turning point in your leadership journey where maybe at one point you're going in one direction and a revelation or an event happened and you started going in a different direction? Can you tell us that story?
I think one of the most dramatic changes in me was about 8 years into my journey. We had gone for a particular project and the project hadn't quite worked in the way that I had hoped it would. And I became very despondent within myself. And I realized through a series of events that I was building my value system of myself around what I did rather than around who I was.
Right.
And so, which is a very subtle thing in life anyway, but very subtle in Christian ministry, that you end up building a portfolio of value based on your achievements, not based on who you are as a person. And I actually realized through this crisis that I was going through that I was a works-driven leader rather than a being-driven leader. And I was more of a human doing than a human being. And it was a dramatic shift for me. It was a revelatory change in my experience because I literally saw myself differently from that moment on. And I think it changed the way I ministered. It changed the way I led. I became just as focused, but a bit more relaxed. And I became more focused on doing what I was, if you like, doing what God asked me to do out of who I was, rather than trying to simply achieve stuff and do stuff, so that I would never again base my value system on what I achieved. It would be based on who I was in God.
How did you realize that?
Well, it was really, I think I reached a real low point in this particular experience. I became very down on myself, believing that I couldn't achieve what God wanted me to achieve. I realized through that experience that actually lots of people were connecting to me, not because of who I was, but because of what I did for them. And therefore it was almost like a bit of a slap in the face. The event, the experience was like a slap in the face. But then as I processed through it, it was a recognition that the strength of of going forward was going to be in an understanding of who I was, not simply what I did. And out of that, I ended up sort of doing some writing around that, but really tried to crystallize this idea of human being before human doing. God is interested in me before he's interested in what I do. And that actually all that I do should come out of who I am.
What do you think the lesson there is for younger leaders?
I think the whole drivenness of the size of your portfolio or your CV or how successful you are is a very, very subtle but potentially tyrannous driver. I think a lot of people are being driven by their need to succeed so as to prove themselves to others. And, we all want to succeed in whatever area we want to succeed in. But when success becomes the driver, then it actually empties your soul, because you can never succeed enough to fully satisfy yourself. So if success itself is the goal, then, you make your first £1 million, you want 2 million. You reach 300 in your church, you want 500. You get a brand new car, you want a Lexus, you want a Ferrari. So it never really, it's like a ravenous beast that is never fully satisfied. And you're always having to do a bit more to top up the tank. Whereas if we can come to a place that success, yes, absolutely, is doing the things we ought to do, but it comes out of a real sense of security in who we are, then even when the externals aren't working so well, the inner person is secure and remains constant, even in the midst of something that doesn't look to be as successful as it could have been. And I think a lot of people are disappointed and give up because the trappings of success are not apparent, and therefore those people are either they devalue themselves or they're devalued by the people around them, and therefore I think opportunities are lost.
And so human doing versus human being. Let's say that so people have those, whether it's a church of 500 and 1,000, who are constantly pursuing these images or just these different images of success. What's the alternative?
Well, I think you can have all of those images of success. So if you put being before doing, that doesn't mean suddenly, you can't be successful. But I think the drivers for success are more authentic, they're more believable, and they're more sustainable. If I'm being driven to success simply because I want to impress those around me, or because I feel that they are the things that give me value, then I'm building my house on sand. Because the minute I lose my job, I lose my value. The minute I don't hit the target I wanted to hit, I lose value. Well, that's a fundamentally broken philosophy. So actually, it's coming to a place where you are valuable and you're dynamic and you're unique and you're special in who you are. Everything else is simply building on that foundation. So if I lose my job, I'm still a valuable person. If I don't quite hit my target, I'm still an outstanding person. If I didn't make the money this year I thought I was going to make, I'm still fearfully and wonderfully made. So in other words, what it does for me is it changes the driver. It changes the epicenter of where I'm locating my value system. And actually, it helps me to do the things that people think are success. So people will look at your CV and see you've written books or you've got a degree or you've led a successful context, and they say that is success. But I would argue they are the signs of success that actually, for me, success is about a healthy lifestyle. It's about having authentic relationships. It's about being at ease with myself and doing what I believe I was put on the earth to do, and actually living faithfully to those principles. So whatever the bottom line looks like, those things remain the same. Those things remain rock bottom, and those are the things that I think can help me be successful, but in a deeper, more authentic way.
It's great. It's brilliant, and that answers all my later questions on how you define success. But yeah, fantastic, man. What's been your biggest challenge in leadership so far?
My biggest challenge in leadership generally, let me talk about a general challenge. My biggest challenge in leadership generally is probably not placing too high expectations on the people around me. So sometimes I expect more than people can give. And then because of that, I sometimes am disappointed. And then I have to deal with the disappointments of those expectations not being met.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a constant challenge for me, because at one sense, because of what I believe and because of what I'm passionate about, I have quite high standards for myself, and that I work hard. I really want to commit myself to what I believe in. But because of that, I sort of expect everybody else to be the same. So in some areas over the years, I've been extremely disappointed by people not hitting the expectations that I thought of them. Some of those expectations were realistic and some weren't. Mm-hmm. And so I've had to adjust my expectations of the people I'm leading, to give them a chance to live well, to give them a chance to grow, to give them a chance to come up to being the best they can be. But that's a process, that's a journey.
So what's the lesson there? I think a lot of us can relate to doing that, if not with others, with ourselves at times. What's the lesson there for an emerging leader, you think?
Well, I think it's setting high goals and high standards, but also realizing that the people we are leading, or the people on our team, are also processing and journeying. So for me, one of the greatest gifts I can give to my team is trying to understand them, where they're at, who they are, and then trying to empower that, rather than setting a target that they may or may not be able to reach, and not understanding the process through that. So for me, it's saying, right, rather than simply setting a goal, I want to set the goal, but also understand my team, understand their giftedness, understand where they are in their journey, and then empower them to move towards that goal.
That's great.
That's been much more fulfilling for me.
That's great.
And I found that I've become a better leader as a result of that. And I think I've been more successful in empowering good teams because of that.
That's great, man. That's great. And that speaks to me about building capacity in our team. And sometimes we're so driven by vision and by goals and our capacities, and yet we've got to be led by our capacity. So building the capacity in those people to bring them along to that place, it's not an easy thing to do. It's a very challenging, and sometimes when we're visionary leaders, patience.
Absolutely.
Not having the patience sometimes, say, come on, guys. Yeah. But I hear that's really good advice, John. Thank you, man. You talked about success earlier, definition for success earlier. It's John Maxwell that said that success is hidden in your daily routine. Yep. What does the first 90 minutes of your day typically look like? I bet it changes all the time, right? But an ideal day, if you were having your ideal day, what would it look like?
First 19 minutes of generally a Monday to Friday would be generally up at 6 o'clock. So I'm a bit of a morning person, so I like early mornings. Up at 6 o'clock, coffee machine on. So I like a cup of coffee first thing in the day. And then I spend usually around about first hour and a quarter as a Christian leader. I think feeding my soul and getting into the presence of God is really, really important. So I spend time in that first hour and a quarter with the Bible. I just process through the Bible very slowly and steadily. And I put out a tweet devotion every day, so a little devotion on Twitter. But actually that first hour and a quarter is about presence of God, feeding my soul, walking through the Bible, and some time in worship and prayer. So that first till about 7:15 is just locked in. And then I change and usually go out for a run. So I would run on average between 2 to 4 miles every day. Wow. Where I live in the country, we've got loads of fantastic running tracks and forest trails and roads. So it's great. And so I would go out and run. And then when I come back, a little bit of light breakfast. And then just, again, depending on my schedule, because where my office is very close to my home. If I'm working from my office, then I try to have a half an hour where I'm working through one of the books that I'm reading. So by 9 o'clock, I've tended to have done a physical workout. This is Monday to Friday, physical workout, spiritual development, and then working through just steadily and slowly one of the books that I'm reading. So I tend to have a couple of books on the go at one time. And again, I'm a great believer in routine. It sounds a bit boring, sounds a bit mundane, but I'm a passionate believer that extraordinary people do ordinary things really well a lot. So the most extraordinary people I know are processors. They're people who know what works and stick to what works and refine what works and just keep doing what works. Somebody once said, "What's the secret of success?" And their answer was doing the right thing long enough. So that's what I'm really committed to. So if you looked at my life generally, it's filled with fairly simple routine processes that I just do really well. And I don't want that to sound arrogant, but I do them well. So in every area that I'm trying to develop, I really try to push as hard as I can.
So what have been the key habits then that have contributed to your success up to now?
Well, I'm a passionate believer in something I call 252. So it's, forgive the plug, but I have written it. It's based on Luke chapter 2, verse 52. And it speaks of Jesus. Jesus is 12 years old. He's about to go back to his hometown and disappear for 18 years. And we hardly know anything about him in that period. But the Bible says he does this amazing thing. It says that Jesus grew in wisdom, in stature, in favor with God, and favor with man. And the word for grow there in the original language literally means to grow on purpose. It means to cut forward. So you get this idea that Jesus goes back to Nazareth and then grows deliberately in 4 key areas: wisdom, intellectual growth; stature, physical growth; wisdom with God, spiritual growth; wisdom with man, emotional growth. Now, even if you're not a follower of God or spiritual, that sounds like a pretty good plan to me. Yeah, so what I try to do is build in regular areas of intentional growth on those 4 things. So I commit myself to intellectual growth, so regular study, regularly reading books, listening to podcasts, getting with sharp, smart people. I'm a great believer in getting around smart people on the areas where I need to get smart. So do that. Commitment to physical exercise, watching what I eat, looking after myself, resting well, days off, holidays, looking after myself. So I'm 48 years of age, and I've had 28 amazing years in Christian ministry, but I'd like to keep going for a wee while, so that's important to me. And then spiritual growth, I'm very intentional around my spirituality. So I would really work hard on areas and ways in which I can grow as a spiritual person. So again, exposing myself to regular routines, engagement with the Bible, prayer, worship, the presence of God, and spiritual people. And then on emotional growth, I'm a passionate believer in community and connectedness. So my wife and I would regularly have people around to our home. We're committed to friendships. We're committed to growing with people. So those are the areas that keep me sharp emotionally in my development. So for me, if I can keep a regular pattern of intentionality around those 4 areas on a monthly basis, I just think I'm going to be pretty close to being a fundamentally healthy person and the best I can be for whatever it is I believe God's calling me to do.
Awesome.
So that's what I live by, 252, and I just keep relentlessly plugging away at it week after week.
Awesome.
Are you experiencing stagnancy in the growth of your organisation or team, or in yourself as a leader? Having someone support you that is experienced and is recognised for their innovative solutions in leadership is key. Errol Lawson is regularly featured on local and national radio. He speaks on various topics from knife and gang crime to religious affairs and personal development. If you're organising a conference and need a speaker, or if you're looking to grow your organisation or to grow yourself as a leader, why don't you leverage his experience to add value to your organisation or to support you in your personal and professional development? Errol currently has a few openings for coaching clients. To arrange a free consultation, email errol@errollawson.com right now to schedule your call.
And what's your biggest weakness?
I would say one of my greatest weaknesses is probably also around my strength, is that I'm a very passionate person, and sometimes my passion can, if you like, get in the way of helping people in the way that they should be helped. So sometimes that passion to go and get something, to push on, to do something, can get me frustrated, impatient, wound up, a little bit intolerant of situations or people around me. So I think any person who's got any level of vision and passion and focus and direction, I think they're very susceptible to frustration and disappointment and aggravation because they're so driven. And so that would be, I would say consistently, I've got to manage my attitude on the things that frustrate me. I've got to manage my reaction to people who I just think, will you just come on and do this thing? Mm-hmm. So I've got to manage my passion around those contexts, or else the very thing that is my strength, which I think passion is one of my strengths, becomes a weakness. It becomes a destructive force in the situations around me. It becomes counterproductive to people or even my context. So I think that's something I've got to constantly stay on top of.
That's great. And your biggest strength?
I work my buns off. I'm just a hard worker. I'm not the most intelligent person on the planet. I mean, I work here in a fantastic Bible college where there are properly clever people, and you know, they have great minds and great brains. I'm not that clever, but I just work really hard. Honestly, I'm not a workaholic. I take good rest. I love my family. I love evenings with my family. So we try to work hard at rest. But do you know what? I'm just not that spectacular. I just work really hard, man. And I think that's one of my greatest strengths. I'm a fairly relentless sort of person. I've been blessed with a great engine. If I was a footballer, I'd be one of those midfielders that just runs up and down all the time. Not necessarily brilliant, but I'm just there. So I think my greatest strength is I know what I am and I know what I'm not, and I just work really, really hard at what I am. That's
great. And going back to the beginning of your leadership journey, what was holding you back from going into leadership?
I think one of the biggest things, and I need to be careful how I say this, would be the expectations of other people on me. I was quite a young person when I felt a real sense of call to leadership, and in that sense, Christian leadership. And of course, you know, going to Bible college at 17, pioneering your first church at 20, that's unfortunately for me, that's exceptional. And I think it should be normal. So I think one of my greatest hindrances and blocks was maybe the world around me that didn't sort of encourage or expect a leader to emerge from somebody so young. So when I'm teaching students here, I talk about the fact that the disciples of Jesus were all between the ages of 12 and 20 when Jesus called them, with the exception of Peter, which normally shocks people because our image of the disciples is they were all sort of super old people. And actually, Jesus picked young men. That was the culture of the day. So what I love about that is that Jesus expected leadership. He expected entrepreneurialism. He expected gifts and talents in young men. He wasn't waiting until they became 30 or 40 or 50. He was looking for those gifts in them when they were 12, 13 and 14. And I love that. And I think that was the biggest challenge, was the expectations, or in some cases, the lack of expectation around me.
Side note, it's a random question. Like when people start at Mattersey, do you ever kind of sit them down and say, right, who sensed that got a call on their life now, call of God in their life right now to go to ministry as soon as they finish here? Do you ever ask that question and say, right, you guys over here, or create something special for them?
Yeah, I mean, we would do that anyway. At their interview level, we would try through. Then we have leadership formation groups. So like I've got six guys in my leadership formation group, and all of them feel a sense of call to leadership, whatever that looks like for them. So I'll be spending at least the next year walking a journey with six of those six guys. We also have a leadership development track here that if people want to go into a certain area of ministry with the denomination we're part of, we can do extra sort of leadership stuff with them that's over and above their course.
There's almost like a mindset or a philosophy that the top job in the body of Christ is the full-time pastor or the full-time minister. And some people may feel as though, well, you know, God can't use me because I also have been a full-time minister, full-time pastor, so I'm relegated to some other low-level, inferior calling in life. What do you say to that, and how do you empower those who maybe have that call but not for full-time ministry?
Yeah, it's a great question. And for me, it's one of the great sadnesses of the Christian world is that we unfortunately give that impression and even sustain that impression. One of the greatest analogies of the church in the New Testament is a body. And in fact, it celebrates the diversity of the body, the fact that there are certain parts of the body that are visible and other parts are invisible to the human eye, that there are parts that seem more important than other parts. And yet, when you draw the body analogy, actually, they all need each other. They function dynamically in a unity out of their diversity. I'm a passionate believer in that actually one of the things that we're encouraged to do by God is to pursue the person God has called us to be and hold to the gifts that God has put within us. If those gifts are best served as a business entrepreneur or an educator or a nurse or a doctor or a mom raising kids, hey, that's cool. And I think actually God is committed to that he has made us uniquely, wonderfully, and fearfully. And what we mustn't do is create this cookie cutter, stereotypical version of what it means to be successful in ministry. Ministry will, for many people today, be going to the business context they work in and holding to ethical values in the midst of a very challenging business context. That is as much a light and a salt in ministry as someone climbing into a pulpit and preaching. They look very different, but actually they're two dynamic expressions of the kingdom of God. So I actually think the church should be empowering people, not necessarily, in some cases this will be the case, but not necessarily to give up their job and become full-time ministers. For some people, that's the worst thing they could do. I think the church should be empowering people to go into their world, go into the arts, go into politics, go into music, go into sport, go into business, and be light and salt. And if we spent more time empowering people into their world, I think actually those people would in turn give much more back to the local church.
Amen. Who were your top 3 mentors?
My dad. So my dad was an amazing man. He's now passed away, but he was an incredible example of integrity, generosity, and spirituality. One of the most genuinely authentic men I've ever met in my life, and a wonderful, wonderful father. Very, very consistent man. And he taught me the power of generosity and consistency. I would say my mum was an incredible influence in that she was actually a very good leader. And she taught me areas of passion and conviction and holding, for what I believed in. My mum never once tried to undo what I believed as long as I could give a reason for what I believed. And I love that about her. She turns 80 next month. And I think a guy called David Shearman, who is a leader, was the leader of Christian Centre Nottingham. He's now retired, still very active though. He was a great guide to me in terms of just helping me think through the processes of growing as a leader in ministry, thinking about issues of who I am, what I'm called to be. And he was very, very gracious and very, very generous to me over the early years of my ministry and has become a great friend to me in the latter years of my ministry.
And just to dig a bit deeper into those relationships, what was the most significant piece of advice that first your dad gave to you, your mum